video is going to be talking about what mental illness actually is, or what mental health problems are. I'm relating it to mental illness, although the correct term would probably be mental health problems. But because of the blog and because of how I'm talking about it, I'm calling today's video, What is Mental Illness? So what is mental illness? Well, it affects the brain, and the brain then affects the different parts of the body that it links to through different neurological pathways. I'm nowhere near being a neuroscientist. I have been learning a bit about the brain and how mental illness affects the brain and therefore the effects on the body. I'll be talking about that at a later date. So when I say it affects the brain and the body, what I'm talking about is that mental illness will affect your behaviour, your thoughts or your feelings. So these are the three things that mental illness will disrupt or disturb. So let me just break those down. Let's talk about behaviours. Well, these are just the way in which you act, the ways you behave. That's not very great, but this is the things that you would act upon. So something would happen and then you would have a response to it, and this would be your behaviour. We have sort of certain behaviours that we live with constantly, and our behaviours can change, and definitely depending on who we're with. For example, maybe on a Friday night with your friends is probably very different to how you react Monday morning with your work colleagues. So that's behaviours. But when I'm talking about disturbed behaviours with regards to mental illness, I'm talking about when our behaviours are not regular to how we are usually. I'm trying to avoid the word normal because there is no such thing as normal. Everyone is different and everyone is individual. But disturbed behaviours could relate to anxiety and avoidance. People who have certain anxieties will avoid certain situations so that they don't have that anxiety. And the more you put off that, the anxiety gets bigger, but it still becomes something that is too stressful or too scary for you to approach. Another one would be drug taking. If people are suffering from suffering from depression or have low self-esteem or are suffering from trauma, people will perhaps have a behaviour to go towards drugs. And it's not the drugs, it's the actual addiction, the brain, that is making them do this behaviour to make themselves feel better, although it is a detriment to themselves. And again, this could be related to food as well. You could be feeling down, and therefore your behaviour when you're feeling down is to eat, and believe me, I definitely know that. Okay, so we've talked about feelings. Sorry, that was behaviours. We talked about behaviours. Let's talk about feelings. So what are our feelings? These are our emotions. These are when we feel happy and sad and angry and all of those emotions, you know, that we experience throughout the day and throughout our lives. So these are kind of, you know, we feel guilty, we feel sad, we feel angry. All of these are totally regular. They're a part of us being human. It is you are allowed to be angry. It's how you act upon it, and it's your behaviours that could then be disturbed if you have maybe anger issues. I'm going off to the side. So yes, so when your emotions are disturbed, so I'm going to go back to depression. Let's talk about depression. This is when your low mood is very, very low. You have very low levels of serotonin, which is a happy chemical. And when you have low levels of this, it will then affect your body. So you actually will have a physical reaction to the feeling, to the sadness. And this is a very disturbed place because you can feel very, very depressed, so much so that you may want to harm yourself, commit suicide, or just kind of stay in a very, very dark, desolate, lonely place. So that is that's an example of disturbed feelings with mental illness. Now finally, I'm going to talk about thoughts. Now, we all know what our thoughts are. They are our internal dialogue reminding us to do things. I've got to send that email, I've got to make that phone call, I've got to arrange that, whatever, blah, blah, blah. All these thoughts happen. But when we have mental illness, our thoughts can be disturbed in many ways. Firstly, it could be that you are saying a lot of negative thoughts to yourself, and this was something that I was very good at. Stemmed from boyfriends. I think I talked about John previously in a previous video, but John would use the words fat, ugly and stupid a lot, so I took those on, and my thoughts would constantly be, I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm stupid. And as my mental illness developed, they would become more disturbed, saying that that person hates me. And it's got to a point now where sometimes I can be out and someone can look at me funny, and I'm like, why are they looking at me like that? And they could just be looking at me and thinking about something completely different. But again, that's a disturbed thought. When you're disturbed, when your thoughts get really disturbed, this could be kind of through having a psychotic episode, psychosis, or if you have a schizoaffective disorder or schizophrenia, when you actually hear voices, and these voices can be very cruel, very controlling. They can make you do things you don't want to do, or make you do things and you're not aware that you're doing them. I've never got to that place. I mean, I've had an episode of psychosis where I was having a voice telling me to kill myself, but that was my voice in a way. It was me saying to do it. But I'm talking about people who have, as well as that, multiple personalities, who hear multiple what am I saying? Yeah, multiple kind of layers of different thoughts and different voices. I mean, it must get very, very scary and a very unnerving place to be. So okay, so hopefully that has summed up behaviours, feelings and thoughts, and also explained how they can be disturbed when you have a mental illness. So that's kind of what mental illness is in the sense, but what I also want to say is that mental illness is a physical illness. I know a lot of us, there are people out there who find mental illness quite scary. They picture people in mental asylums in padded rooms with straitjackets on, and some of that may still happen, but majority of the time, you know, we're just kind of regular people who have to suffer with this illness, and we have episodes and times when things are really hard. But just because it's part of the brain, it's still physical, it's still part of us, it's still an organ, just like the lungs and the heart. But I think people see it differently because they can't see it. However, I would say you can't really see diabetes, and maybe you can't really see cancer. These are other illnesses that we're talking about more openly, I would say. And it's because of that stigma, because people aren't talking about it, people are scared of it. But what we need to be saying really is that mental illness is a physical illness, and we really don't need to say otherwise. I will very quickly say that my mum has type 2 diabetes. She has to manage that with diets and exercise and medication. I have a mental illness. I have to manage it in just the same way with medication, but I also have therapy. I'm actually no longer in therapy, but I have been in a variety of different therapy groups which have helped me. So again, it's managing and understanding your illness. So just to finish, we'll be talking about the causes of mental illness in another video, but I hope today's given you an insight into the fact that excuse me, mental illness affects the brain. It affects our behaviours, our feelings and our thoughts. It can make them disturbed, and actually when you have disturbed feelings and thoughts, your behaviour will be disturbed. If your behaviour is disturbed, you may have disturbed feelings. So the three interact very well with each other, and sometimes not so well. And this leads down the road to CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy. I'll be talking about that in another video. But that's a really good way of saying that the three work hand in hand and create the symptoms that we have for maybe anxiety or depression. So I keep saying that. So I keep saying so and okay. Hopefully that'll work its way out. Hopefully. That is what is mental illness. I'm glad you watched today. Thank you for tuning in, YouTube, and I will see you next time.